I live a double life where like I'm looking for ways to fit bigger things up my butt. At the same time, I'm making sure that I do right by my girl and never tell a lie.
It's Mayim Bialik's breakdown. She's gonna break it down for you because you know she knows a thing or two. So now she's gonna break down. It's a breakdown. She's gonna break it down.
Hi, I'm Mayim Bialik, and welcome to the Thursday Breakdown. This is the place where we break things down so you don't have to, and it's a Thursday because this is part 2 of our, what I think is a very interesting conversation with Steve-O. In our first episode, if you haven't listened to it, you can probably still enjoy this one on its own, but finding out how Steve-O got from his first language of Portuguese, growing up with a corporate Pepsi-Cola father, very, very kind of wealthy, privileged upbringing, to clown college and lots of drugs and alcohol, not really showing up for life in the way that we now know he can. We highly recommend you have a listen to part 2 of Steve-O. Jonathan, do you want to add anything before we get into part 2?
Skateboarding was in the previous one. He starts getting into stunts. He has a video camera. He drops out of school. There's a ton of material in the first one if you haven't listened.
He went to clown
you can also
college.
jump in here.
Yes. Jump in with us.
And also he went to clown
college, and he tells all about it. But in this episode, we're going to talk about kind of what happened after clown college, what his bottom was, what his visits to the mental institution looked like, and where his life is now.
Also, steveo.com for all things Steve-O, and his new book.
Yes. A hard kick in the nuts, what I've learned from a lifetime of terrible decisions. He says it's his juiciest book yet, but also full of insight. Steve-O, welcome back to The Breakdown.
Break it down.
At the point when I was accepted to clown college, my primary source of revenue was drug dealing. I was selling like weed, and it actually remained that way after clown college because I did not get a contract. I was not one of the 10 clowns who was awarded a contract at the circus. So I came back to where I lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico, with a very fancy clown costume, which I hung in the closet, and it just hung in the closet while I continued to sell weed. The people who did get contracts with the circus, I was just so kind of heartbroken at that point because I fell in love with the dream of becoming a clown. And I would wake up from I would have dreams when like I was in the circus and I'd wake up and I wasn't, and I'd just be in a morass of depression. Was that the correct use of the word morass?
I think so. It sounded right.
I was trying to sound smart.
Do you know why you weren't offered a contract? Like, was there something that those 10 had that you did? Because, like, for me, I'll always make up the story of like, well, none of them have prominent features. You know, was there some reason?
I told you about how I got my head stapled together in the first week.
Oh, yeah.
I was drunk every night.
Yeah, that might be reasons, but I wasn't judging.
The general consensus was this guy doesn't want to be a clown. He wants to be a stuntman. What's he doing here?
Right.
What an asshole. And so I was heartbroken by the end of it to not get the contract. And I dealt with it. The only way that I knew how was to just step it up with my crazy stunts. And I really took the stunts to another level. And I was so happy with the footage that I was getting. I put together a compilation video of all this awesome new stuff. And I mailed VHS videotapes to the clowns who were actually on the circus, just so that they could know how awesome I was.
I'll show you clowning around.
Exactly. That was a big thing for me. Like the girl who broke my heart by dumping me, like she got a videotape from me in the mail every year.
Was this before sobriety, one might imagine?
Oh, okay. Yeah, for
Just
sure.
checking.
For sure before sobriety. And so the job that the clowns had on the circus for the Ringling Circus was really pretty bad. I mean, they were making like $235 a week at the point when my class went into the circus. So if there ever was a question about whether the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus abused its animals, my answer was always, of course they do. Look how they treat their people.
I don't mean to laugh, but that's a very interesting way of putting it.
Yeah, look how they treat their people and extrapolate it. And then you can assume that, yes, the animals were abused, except the animals got a much shorter end of the stick, which is why it all sort of went away. But, justifiably so. And especially after like that big nationwide, huge recruiting effort, what they really had done is to isolate, to unearth like real legitimately talented people. And then they were having a lot of difficulty keeping those talented people for the bullshit that they were paying them. And they had a lot of people leave. They would bring in other people. Like it was just a little bit of a disaster. And I think that that's largely why the clown college ended after my class. But among the disgruntled clowns that were actually on the circus, a few of them got a gig going on Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines, which was dramatically better. It paid, I want to say, $600 a week, maybe $650, and you weren't crammed into a 6x3 closet on a train for 50 weeks a year. You're actually on a fairly luxurious cruise ship with your own cabin and no expenses whatsoever, and your permanent vacation. So they got this cool job, and it was called interactive performers, where you would essentially you'd be in clown makeup like once or twice a week. Every night you would warm up the crowd in the theater before their big Broadway style show. And you would have designated times to go travel around in different characters that you would assume and entertain the passengers that's on the ship. And they got this gig going. They needed to fill some more spots. And they had remembered seeing my fuck you video, of all my sins. And they thought that for some of the skills that I demonstrated in the video that I mailed to the circus, they thought of me and they recruited me for that job.
How long did you do that?
I did that. I had a contract for 6 months. That was my first clown job. Mm-hmm. Before that, I was actually making some money dressing up as a clown and performing in a nightclub. I'd get drunk and do fire breathing acrobatics in a nightclub. And, I made very little money, but I got to drink for free. And they fired me because I was drinking too much.
I see a pattern here.
Right, a real pattern. But off I went on to Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines with a 6-month contract to be an interactive performer. And what was exciting about that was that the actual interactive performer job title, it was just a training, like a training program for the big launch of what was going to be the world's largest passenger vessel. The biggest cruise ship on Earth was about to set sail on the maiden voyage. They were building it over in Turku, Finland. And what we were doing for our 6-month contract was just simply an exercise in training for this exciting new program that was going to be a part of this new ship. And I had I was part of a troupe of 4 clowns working on this ship. And I had in my view, a badass skill set. I could entertain anybody, anywhere, any situation. I could I had like bar tricks. I had all these great skills. I didn't see that these other clowns I was working with had rad skills. What they were trying, the stuff that they were trying to write, the little performances, I didn't think they were funny. I didn't think they were rad. I didn't respect the clowns I worked with. And I made that pretty abundantly clear. And I felt that I had job security because I was really, I did well with entertaining people. But the other clowns felt disrespected by me. They made a pact. They went to the cruise ship brass and they said, if Steve-O comes back for another contract, we all quit. It was a clown mutiny. So they now the boss clown, who is from the circus, who scored the gig in the first place. There were 4 boss clowns, and we were the next troop underneath. Well, the boss clown called a meeting with me, and he said, "Hey, man, I'm going to tell you something, and you got to keep it to yourself, because if anybody finds out, I'm going to lose my job. But the clowns in your troop went behind your back, and they made it so that your contract's not being renewed." And I still had another solid 2 months on my contract, and I could not let on that I knew that they had gotten me fired. And he said, "Hey, I'm just telling you because I think what they did was kind of lame. They didn't have the balls to tell you, but you're not coming back for another contract, so you need to call up your skateboard buddies." His exact words. He says, "You need to call up your skateboard buddies and drum something up, because this job's ending for you at the end of your contract." And we were in Miami at that point, getting ready to board a flight to Turku, Finland, where the world's largest passenger vessel was being built. And it was like a crazy situation. There was a fire that burned through like 10 floors of it. Everything was behind schedule. It was a construction site. We had to be wearing hard hats to go to our cabins. And we were learning at this point like scripted routines. We had a swing dance number that we were performing on stilts, which just looked about as awful as you can imagine. And there were actual scripts to learn lines, and I was rehearsing all of these acts, which I knew I would never perform. I mean, my contract ended at the end of the crossing of the Atlantic. The crossing of the Atlantic before the maiden voyage.
Yes, I get it.
And then the next contract was to begin with the actual first voyage. And I knew that I was rehearsing and learning and working my ass off to perfect these performances, which I knew I would never perform. And I could not let on.
That's Sisyphusian, right? Like that is Sisyphus pushing a rock, right? That you were pushing a rock up a hill, but you even knew, well, you know what's going to happen at the top.
And it was so great too, because they paid us every 2 weeks in cash. And one day, with one of the clowns in my troupe, we were doing the weekly report. Now, I have killer typing skills because when the summer when I turned 16 years old, my dad said, "Now you're 16, you have 2 choices: either get a summer job or go to secretary school and learn how to type, because I predict computers are going to become more prevalent in our society." And Dad said this in 1990. It's so awesome that my dad is that rad. 1990, the internet didn't come along until 96, right? So Dad's predictions were solid. I went to secretary school. I learned how to type. And now when I'm on the cruise ship, I'm the guy typing up the weekly report for the cruise ship brass, while my clown partner is sitting there with idle hands. And as I typed, this guy grabs a stapler off the desk in the cruise ship office. He opens it up and just whacks his arm with it, leaving a staple in his arm. And I'm like, whoa. I'm thinking that was the coolest thing I've ever seen, dude. That was rad. I loved it. And so the next time we got paid, there's $100 bills. And 1,200 of them, like $600 a week. I filmed a bit called The $1,000 Man, and I stapled $100 bills, 10 of them across my arms, down my arms, across my chest, and it was like my first staple bit. And I would go on to take the staple bit further and further.
The staple bit went very far.
Mayim Bialik's Breakdown is supported by ZocDoc.
Jonathan, who knows best what you're looking for in a doctor?
You do.
No one knows what you're looking for in a doctor better than you. And no one's better at giving you the tools to find the perfect doctor than ZocDoc. They make booking a great doctor surprisingly pain-free. Who knew that you could find quality doctors who take your insurance and who are available when you actually want to see them. That's what ZocDoc has done for us and can do for you. It's a free app that shows you doctors who are patient reviewed, they take your insurance, and they're available. On ZocDoc, you can find every specialist under the sun. Jonathan, are you trying to straighten those teeth?
I chipped a tooth. I need to go find a dentist.
Fix an achy back?
My back's okay.
Get that mole checked out?
I should get scanned.
Or anything else, ZocDoc has you covered. ZocDoc's mobile app is as easy as ordering a ride to a restaurant or getting delivery to your house.
Go to ZocDoc.com/breakdown and download the ZocDoc app for free. Then start your search for a top-rated doctor today. Many are available within 24 hours. That's ZocDoc.com/breakdown.
ZocDoc.com/breakdown. So many people know, obviously, many of the awesome, crazy, bizarre, hilarious things that you kind of went on to do. But in the rest of our time with you, I do kind of want to focus in a little bit on, you know, your road to sobriety, which getting clean, getting sober, like that's one part of it. But the other parts that people kind of rarely talk about is kind of actually what the living was like, because, you know, like counting days and counting years, that's one part of sobriety. But, you introduce the word bipolar, you introduce, concepts of depression, both in your writing and kind of in your living. And you also spent, some, I don't want to say significant time, but emotionally significant time in a facility. And, that's a place that, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous says, like, the kind of drinking and partying that many do will lead to insanity or death. And they used to put people in these like sanatoriums, like they didn't know what to do with people. So you obviously were getting sober and living at a time where there was a lot more conversation about it. But can you sort of explain like what was bottom? Like what did it look like, and sort of how do you get, how do you keep moving from what your bottom was?
Bottom is when you stop digging. Like that's my favorite way of looking at it. And that's the most like well documented thing. I would say the fact that when I reached the end of my run, it was Johnny Knoxville organized an intervention and came over with, like, there were a group of 8 guys, and they were fully prepared to overpower me and force me into a psychiatric ward for a 72-hour evaluation, which is also known as a 5150. And 72 hours would not have done the trick. And when I showed up, I was properly belligerent. Like I was spitting on people and stuff and trying to throw furniture around. And so they did 2 things. They changed my status from 5150, which is a 72-hour involuntary psychiatric hold or evaluation. They changed that to 5250, which is an involuntary psychiatric hold for up to 2 weeks. And at the Thalians medical unit of the Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles, they had 2 wings. There was, I think it was East Wing and West Wing. Like one was for the psych ward, and one wing of the psych ward was for sort of standard issue, harmful to yourself or others. And then the other wing was for like the something else people, like over and above, above and beyond harmful to yourself and others. And I was on the something else wing for the first maybe 4 days or 5 days. Somebody gave me a copy of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's really weird. I'm kind of programmed to not say that at a public level of media, but like you said, Big Book, and like, it's what it was. It was, they gave me the soft cover version, which is more difficult to hurt yourself with, as they wouldn't allow you to have the hardcover version in the psych ward. But he gave to this guy, identified himself as a heroin addict. He said that he was like, this book could help me. Like, I thought, I'm just thinking, why is a heroin addict giving me a book about alcoholism? And like, he's telling me he cares about me, wants me to get better. While we're both on suicide watch in like, that gnarly psych ward. And I didn't want to be rude, and I sort of graciously accepted the book, but I never, the idea of, for me at that point of treating alcoholism was just so foreign, like, I mean, I my view of myself was that I was beyond help.
Right. And also you're experiencing your own version of hell because they've taken away all of your drugs. They've taken away everything that was protecting you from being in touch with yourself. And that's very painful.
That is true as well. And I was, on top of coming from a long line of alcoholics on my mom's side of the family, it never skipped a generation. It was 100% of everybody, every leaf on the tree. And so I came by it honestly. I'm a pedigree alcoholic, thoroughbred, like full blood, just in the grips of it. I could not fathom the idea that I could ever be clean and sober. It was just so like my core belief was that I was beyond help, that I was a lost cause. And as such, there was no solution for alcohol. I'd seen everybody in my family, every time they swear off drinking, they always drink again without fail, 100% of the time. Like, so I just let go and let alcohol. That was just my deal. And then, so yeah, the guy gave me the book, and I wasn't, there was absolutely no purpose for me to open this book because there was no solution for me. That was, again, my core belief. But one night in that psych ward, and thank God I was in the psych ward because there was nothing else to do and I couldn't sleep. And I was, all right. So I just opened the book and just read it from the beginning, strictly to kill time. There was absolutely no part of me that thought I was looking for help from this book. But as I read it from the beginning, there's the about alcoholism, like the doctor's opinion, like there's Bill's story. Right. It actually goes the doctor's opinion and then Bill's story comes first. And I think it's actually before Bill's story and the doctor's opinion, it talks about like it says specifically that alcoholics who were hopeless alcoholics who were determined to die, who became sold on the ideas in this book, went on to become the finest specimens of people that you could ever hope to meet. And of course I could relate to hopeless because there's no, like a glass cannot be less than empty, like that. I was as hopeless as could possibly be in my alcoholism, and determined to die. I had that covered too. I was on suicide watch, but I earned it. I promised that I was going to attempt to take my life, and that's why I was in there. So I related so much, and the way that it described the guy going into the barn and trying to die, and then a couple of years later, they don't even recognize the guy because he's just a totally different person. And they were clearly painting a picture that that the more hopeless the alcoholic, the better. Like my core belief was that I was past the point, that I was a lost cause. But this book made it like it really, in a way that I could understand, it described that there is no such thing as lost cause, like past the point of help, beyond help. You can't be beyond help. Actually, it's the inverse of that, where if you think that you have any hope of controlling alcohol, then you're not a candidate. So the more hopeless of the alcoholic you are, the bigger the chance there is for recovery. Hopelessness is actually your ultimate asset.
Well, and that's the basis also of this notion of surrender. Like, and people say, I came in on my knees. Like, when you crawl in on your belly, you know, you're down.
Step one, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. And we had to admit complete and utter defeat.
So did you stay longer than 2 weeks? Because I know you came out, you went back.
No, what happened was I read this doctor's opinion, and I kept reading into Bill's story that same night. And it shook my core beliefs. It actually very distinctly to me was describing me specifically as like the best candidate for recovery. And I had honestly not thought that way. And it didn't make me all of a sudden become super willing, but it absolutely covered step one. We find victory in defeat, success in surrender, it's there's all these paradoxes in recovery. We find comfort through discomfort.
Were you given a diagnosis then of bipolar? Was that something you knew about? Like
that came later.
Got it.
That came later. But what happened the day after, the next day after I read the book, a panel of three sober guys from AA came in to share their stories in the psych ward. And again, just like I never would have opened that book if I wasn't locked up in a psych ward, I never would have gone into that room to hear a word that these guys had to say. I had nothing better to do but to go in and listen to these guys who I never would have hung out with,
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going in there like, all right, they're going to talk about sobriety. Like, again, one guy was in a suit, there's like, they just weren't guys that I related to, but I could also tell that I could relate to the way they described their powerlessness over drugs and alcohol. And as they described the program and how they stayed sober, step two is we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity.
That's where a lot of people are like, peace out.
Right. But the best way to interpret it, in my view, is step one is I got a problem that I cannot fix by myself. And step two is I came to believe that these 12 steps and that this program is the solution to fix the problem I have, which I cannot fix by myself. And then step three is I made a decision to commit myself to these 12 steps in this program, this solution. And as these guys told their stories and described the program, I just distinctly came to believe that what they were describing worked for them. That they weren't full of shit, that what they were describing as a program of recovery, the fellowship of AA, the 12 steps of AA, that it saved their lives and it kept them sober and it made life worth living for them. And with all of this great stuff on top. So, in coming to believe that it worked for them, it followed that it could work for me. So that covered step two. And then as it related to step three, they covered that for me as well, because they handed out this annoying 20 questions of AA, which, as you read these questions, it's described, I think maybe on there, that if you answer yes to one of them, there's a good chance you might be an alcoholic. If you answer yes to two, yeah, you're pretty much an alcoholic. And if you answer yes to three, you're cooked. So they gave me the 20 questions. I read them with somewhat of an open mind. I won't argue, but I could argue that due to my special circumstances in life, some of the questions were not applicable to me. But by no means can I have honestly said no to any of them.
Yeah.
I fucking aced the test, 100%, 20 yeses.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the
basically.
questions right now. Yeah.
Yeah. And the questions are particularly hilarious if you switch the word drink with think.
That's what those of us in Al-Anon get to do. And I lose a lot of time with my thinking. It's true. And it makes my life unhappy, all my thinking.
Yeah. Have you ever lost time at work due to thinking?
Yeah.
But yeah, having aced that test, like it was like, fuck, here I came to believe in what these guys were talking about, but it sounded awful. Like it did not sound like a fucking good time by any measure. Like it sucked. Like just because I believed in their solution didn't mean that I wanted anything to do with it, except when they gave me those 20 questions and I aced the test, then I found myself like painted into a corner, like fuck, like I realized like, I step one, and then I fucking read like, these guys talk about this solution that I believe will work for me. And then the 20 questions paints me into a corner where, as much as I fucking hate the idea of it, I know that I got to do what they just described. And I'm like, God. And I believe strongly that if somebody magically appeared in this hallway that I was, it was a little room in the psych ward where they gave me the thing and I read it and I'm in this hallway and I'm like, oh, this sucks, but I got to do this, And had somebody magically appeared in that hallway and said, hey, you look like you might be thinking about committing yourself to a program of recovery in the 12 steps of AA. And I just want to take this time to remind you that only about 5% of alcoholics achieve long-term sobriety. So it's a really losing proposition. And I would urge you to not bother with this bullshit. Like at that time, I don't think that would have deterred me when I made that decision. And that's what step 3 is. We made a decision. We made a decision to turn our lives and our will and our lives over to the care of this power greater than ourselves, which we've just come to believe in. And that's particularly like powerful to me because what had kept me loaded for the last 13 years since my first time being locked up in a rehab was those statistics. A counselor had the nerve to say only 5% of alcoholics achieve long-term sobriety. And I'm like, at that time, when I was only 20 in what the year was, 1995, I was like, this fucking asshole, is he out of his mind? He's telling me that even if I was into the idea, I would have a 5% chance. Like, I'm going to go ahead and say, fuck this and go and let go and let alcohol, And this time around, it was a different deal because now like something had changed and I was ready, where if somebody brought up those statistics now, I would have likely argued that I've beaten bigger odds than that in every single thing I've done in my life. And 5% make it, like, so you're telling me it can be done, and I just took it seriously. So I made the decision in that psych ward. I went over to the little reception desk in the psych ward and I told them something that they've heard before, like, you can let me out now. Like I'm like, I just want to go. I want to just go to rehab. I made my decision and I'm going to go to rehab. I'm not trying to go pack a bag. I don't need time to think about it. And they did just that. They let me out. I went straight to rehab, where the rehab I went to was in Pasadena at what used to be an insane asylum, way back in the day, a place called Los Encinas Hospital, where the director of the chemical dependency unit at that time was my buddy, Dr. Drew Pinsky. Yep. And he was still working there. And, I remember telling Dr. Drew, I said, hey man, like, I know that the odds are not in my favor here, but now that I'm here, now that I'm gonna, do this, I don't want to waste my fucking time, man. Like if I'm gonna do this, I want to give myself every advantage. And so I told him that however long you recommend I stay in this chemical dependency unit of this hospital, I want to stay significantly longer because I know that the odds are against me. And that was like the equivalent of handing him a blank check. And to Dr. Drew's credit, he said, He said, I love to hear that. I'd love to hear that you're committed to this. He said, but I just don't recommend you stay here for more than 30 days. That doesn't make any sense to me. But if you're really serious about your recovery, I recommend after 30 days, then going into a sober living home.
Is that what you did?
And I stayed in sober living until I had 2 full years.
Wow. I did not know that about you.
With no court order, with no nothing. I just and that's how I feel about it to this day. Like, I don't want to waste my time.
So did you, at that time, I mean, you were also getting help with other aspects of your...
It was when I was in the 30 days at Las Encinas that a psychiatrist, just started firing off prescriptions. They made fun of me in rehab for all the pills I was taking, the Depakote. I don't even remember all the names of them.
I know Depakote.
But they called me medicine boy. This doctor got paid extra for the more prescriptions he wrote. Presumably he did, but it was fucking insane how much, this bipolar thing. I maintain to this day that anybody who polluted themselves with as many chemicals as I did would probably be bipolar too.
There's something that I'd love you to address, and then we'll let you go. There's a very kind of dude, energy around the work that you've done and sort of the way that you've sort of made this life for yourself. And I'm sure there are, women who consider themselves dudes who also appreciate you. But there's this certain sense of like, playful, almost kind of like juvenile, like just like the craziest shit that you can think of. You've done it, you've tried it, and you will continue to do so. And one of the things that I wanted you to address, though, is that for you, I'm curious where you've kind of arrived in having a life where that was born out of insobriety, and you also talk about, your behavior surrounding women and sex, like all of those things were kind of part of that. But if you can sort of just give us like kind of like, your summary, as it were, because you still live an amazing, interesting, crazy life, and you do it in a way that I don't see that your spirit has been broken by your experiences. And sure, it's definitely, there's a different level of fun than being drunk and stoned all the time, I'm sure. But if you could just kind of like sum up for us, like if you think of like a young dude who's like, I want to be like him, like what's the sort of take home message here?
There's a fair amount to unpack there, and I'll start with the young dude who says I want to be like him. It doesn't matter if you want to be a crazy stunt person, an influencer, an author, like a musician, like an athlete, like whatever it is. I have precisely the same advice for anybody pursuing any ambition, goal, dream, and that advice is to just immediately start doing what it is that you want to do, because that's the way, like the way to get good at anything is to start doing it. The only caveat to that advice, which I feel strongly about, is to find some sort of guidance to make sure that you're starting in the correct manner, because there's no benefit to getting started doing something the wrong way. Like with juggling, if you learn bad habits, then you got to put all the work into unlearning your bad habits before you can start learning the correct way. So find some guidance, like from somebody who's further along than you, to make sure that you're learning the correct way. Find a mentor, find some way to know that you're on the right track, but get on that fucking track and waste no goddamn time. It doesn't matter what you want in life to accomplish nearly as much as it matters how badly you want it. Like for me, I feel strongly that intelligence is an asset. It's something useful, as is talent. But both of those things are fucking chicken shit when compared to enthusiasm. You know, when you've got real passion to get something done, that's the engine that drive. It's the engine that drove me in everything I've ever done. You know, like I couldn't apply myself to shit unless I was passionate about it. And what's so great about that, enthusiasm being the driver of all things that matter, you know, that someone pointed out that the word enthusiasm broken down to its Latin roots are en theos, which means with God. And I fucking love that. So with you know, like with the whole thing, and yeah, like my identity was very caught up in being the wild and crazy loaded guy, drugs, crazy for sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And yeah, I had a crisis on my hands when I knew that my life depended on getting sober. Fortunately, I made sobriety the priority, and if that meant everything else going away, then I was ready for that. And that's the kind of surrender that's necessary. The thing that I hate the most, and I've let it bother me way too much, is seeing comments online about, oh, dude, Steve-O was funnier when he was on drugs. Dude was way cooler when, you know, like, fuck, I like the old version of Steve-O. And like, I know that's fucking bullshit, because like as it got toward the end of my run with drugs and alcohol, I became pitifully one-dimensional. You know, that like I was sad, and I was a pussy. You know, like I just made a video about 10 stunts that I backed out of. You know, it's a big question. Like people are like, what was too much? What wouldn't you do? So I made a video of 10 things I backed out of, and they were all from before I got sober. You know, like, I mean, not all of them, but as far as like being like afraid and not committing because I wimped out, yeah, it was before I got sober. And, you know, like I did let go of all the unhealthy behaviors that don't serve me. I live a double life where like I'm looking for ways to fit bigger things up my butt. At the same time, I'm making sure that I do right by my girl and never tell a lie. You know, like it's a crazy double life that I live, and I love that. And I have to, I owe it all to 12-step recovery, that I've been able to find separation between the persona of Steve-O and like the person, whatever that means, you know, because if my identity, if my self-worth is tied to my value as a commodity in the world of entertainment, then God, am I on a fucking scary track, you know, like, and by finding separation between the persona and the person, not only have I been able to forge a path to where I can actually see myself being happy, healthy, and fulfilled after the entertainment persona goes away, but I've actually become way fucking better at managing the persona too.
I love that.
You know, like the sea level raises all ships, you know, like I'm way better at business. I'm way better creatively. I'm way funnier, you know, fuck anybody who says I'm not as funny as I'm way fucking funnier than I was when I was loaded.
Steve-O, it has been really a pleasure to talk to you. And we think you're very, very special. You're a very special person. And I really appreciate how honest you've been, not only with us, but in your writing and in everything about you. And we just think you're so awesome. So thank you so much.
And before I go, I want to implore your listeners, as I did on the last one, to pre-order my new book.
Absolutely.
A hard kick in the nuts. What I've learned from a lifetime of terrible decisions. As it's worth how uncomfortable it gets with me being way too revealing about all the sex addiction. It's the juiciest fucking most just gnarly book.
Steve-O, thank you so much. He's such a great storyteller. This is why this had to be 2 episodes, because whatever he has done to his brain with all the drugs and alcohol that he talks about, the man's memory is incredible.
I mean, not to mention the concussions.
He has lived a life, and also to come to terms with all of your demons and still be able to, you know, have the energy and the enthusiasm, right, to keep doing what he does.
What we didn't get to ask him is like around the motivation to keep doing the types of stunts that he does.
I don't know why he does them.
Because in the first part of the interview, in the first section, he talked about how it was this self-destructive nature and feelings that drove him to his initial stunts. So when you remove that or you change the intensity of it, what's still going? Like, does he ever want to go to work and come back not injured?
No, he doesn't want to go to work and come back not injured. What I think it is I think, like, you know, it's when he talks about the persona of like Steve-O versus like Steve, like his whole life became about building that persona even before he was famous. Like, meaning like he was that guy, like, you know, he was that guy. And, you know, part of, I think, what he's uncovered and discovered is, you know, that's part of that alcoholism loop. You know, it's the recognition, it's the losing yourself. It's all of that stuff. And, you know, it's kind of like we spoke about, I think, in our first episode, like first it's fun, then it's fun with problems, and then it's just problems. And I think that's true of alcohol. I think it's true of workaholism. Like, I think it's, you know, well, I guess workaholism's not always fun, but it kind of is. It's like, yeah, so productive. And then, but. So I think for him, like, it became just like building this persona, and then in sobriety and also in managing some very real mental health challenges, which, yes, there's a propensity that he talked about for alcoholism, and there's a lot of overlap there. But yeah, the situations that he put himself in and the amount of chemicals, like, it's not like, that's when it's not funny, you know? And that's sort of what I'm kind of glad he addressed a bit. Like, he believes he's funnier. And even if you don't agree, whoever the you are, he's not going to die, meaning from his disease now. And that's, like he said, right? Bottom is when you stop digging. I mean, I cannot wait to dig into this book. I mean, the clown college stuff was just so exciting. We had to turn this into 2 episodes. And
I heard you're starting a new clown college and you're going to be the president.
No, but I did like when he said clown boss. I was like, I want to be a clown boss. That being said,
you are my clown boss.
From our breakdown to the one we hope you never have. We'll see you next time.
It's Mayim Bialik's breakdown. She's gonna break it down for you. She's got a neuroscience PhD or 2.